Oh yeah. All right, Mr. Matt, we are live.
Awesome.
So this is our first Monday Cyber Talk. We're gonna do this every Monday, like around 3:30.
That's the inaugural one, so good stuff.
Actually, hang on, let me make sure we're doing this at the right time.
It's 3:30.
Yeah, 3:30.
3:30.
Perfect. Um, and so what we're gonna do every week is, and you and I, like we have so many good stories that come up. I mean, we're constantly dealing with small businesses, medium, even some large businesses, right? And we see some crazy stuff. And you would think that people are like making good decisions with all the stuff that's on the news and all the awareness, and some of them are, but there's so many that still aren't. So just to introduce real quick,
Mhm.
is my name showing up here? Let me take this thing down. There we go. So we have me, we have Matt Rosenthal. I'm the CEO of Minecore. We have Matt Johnson, who is our Chief Information Security Officer, works out of Maryland, based out of Maryland. His entire team uh, is called SOC Logics, and we've been working together for what, over 10 years now, 12 years, something like that.
2016, 2015, 2014, somewhere
It's
around
been
there.
a long time.
Long time.
It's been a long time.
Yeah.
So let's what are we going to do? So in the next 20, 25 minutes, you and I actually had an experience with a client of ours. Was it 3 weeks ago? They had a breach. So let's talk about that. Let's see if we can deliver some value to anybody who's watching this, and maybe point out some of the pitfalls, some of the things that they didn't do right and why. And then we can talk about just the pointers of like what you should do to not have a breach. Sound
Yeah.
good?
Yeah. I mean, the worst thing you want to get is a 1:45 a.m. phone call stating that systems are being encrypted, you're losing access to servers, and you have access to nothing. So nobody wants that phone call. And we get it all the time because that's what we do. But yeah.
It's I mean, it's kind of crazy. Like I got the call. It was I was actually sleeping, but I think our team, there was like 5 or 6 of you on the phone at 1:45, and I think I finally heard my phone vibrating at 4 o'clock in the morning. I pick up the phone and everybody's like, "We got a major breach."
Right.
So I'm like, "Okay, well, tell me what's going on." So I think that, like, to sum it up, it was a small business, right? They had probably like 35 people, but they service. They're in the hospitality industry and they service a lot of people. And it seemed in the end we never actually figured out exactly what happened, but from what we all could gather, seemed like there was somebody who was on one of their POS, which is the point of sale machines, and they probably clicked on a phishing email. Hold on, gotta make sure I put this in here. There we go. So it seems like they clicked on a phishing email, and because of that, somebody, whoever these people were, they ended up getting on that computer. We did begin to get some alerts and we started to look into it, but they moved, and you stop me and tell me where I might have this wrong, but they moved really quickly. And
Yeah.
as we were investigating and seeing what's going on, they were like moving quick, and they had encrypted at this point like 29 computers already.
Correct. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, typically once we see that there's some activity, there's 10, 15, 20 days of time before encryption starts. But my theory, based on years of experience, is that once they saw that we were poking around and started to change some passwords and remove some accesses, they went ahead quickly at the middle of the night and started the encryption process, which we saw right away. But the encryption was so fast that it just dorked all the machines very quickly.
And what was this one called again?
This was oh man,
I want to say Aurora, but that's not what it was.
Kira, aka IRA.
Kira, yeah. So it's really common. They've been around for like three years, right? Everybody knows about them.
They're what's called a dual extortion. They ransomware and they take your files. They threaten that if you don't pay them, they'll release your files on their site. They will give you some nice things. They'll tell you, they'll let you decrypt a few. They'll show you what they have, and they'll tell you that if you pay or give them what they want, they'll delete them off their servers. We have to take them at their word for that. But they do kind of show you a nice little.
Yeah, they're honest criminals.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as we can see, I have on the screen here, this. So we think it was a phishing email. We think somebody clicked on it, and that gave these people access, and they very quickly cracked the admin passwords.
Correct.
And once they had that, they deleted all the backups.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the key. I think when you saw the message on the screen, it was a message that said that it was $500,000 in ransom they wanted, right?
Yeah, it was the message on the screen. Then I immediately went into their Tor site, dark web, lots of fun stuff. Contacted them and said, "Hey, here's the site that you just ransomware. What do we need to get this undone?" And their first message back was $500,000.
Yeah. So we began. I mean, we went through for the next. I feel this maybe into the next day. Like you immediately began negotiating with them because you can negotiate.
Yeah, within about an hour.
So it started out at 500,000, but let's not move forward too fast here. We believe it was a phishing email. The other thing that was important, we had been giving advice, strongly urging these people to put MFA in place, and they would not give us the approval. Now, this has been going on for 2 years. If MFA was in place, this would not have happened. I mean, they would have gotten in, but they wouldn't have been able to do the damage that they did. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, nothing's infallible, nothing's 100%, but 99.99%, if there is MFA on there, they would have not have gotten into that particular machine or been able to get admin passwords or ransomware the backups or delete the backups, actually, yeah.
And it's interesting because one of the questions that came up early on is, what's in place, what's not in place. And, we're careful. I don't want to put a spotlight on the client, because insurance companies got involved, lawyers got involved. I mean, it was a big deal. So MFA wasn't in place, and that's important to note. And the other thing that was really important to note here was the backups were deleted. So, one of the most important things for us is, we could just go to the backups and we're not paying a ransom. Well, in this case, these people were good. They were able to crack passwords. They were able to get in, delete all the backups. I think they actually wiped out the entire backup server.
Yeah, they actually factory reset the server. It looked like.
I mean,
they wanted us to reset it up. So.
You and I have been doing this together for a long time. I've never seen that happen.
No, not factories. I've seen them delete backups and encrypt backups.
Yeah.
Not through the process of factory resetting.
I mean, they were thorough. They were trained.
Very thorough.
And
one interesting thing to note is, we know you had ER, endpoint detection on the machines, but they used a particular style of attack that bypassed that by only launching it from one machine and using kind of a backdoor to the rest of them. So.
Yeah, and what I think while we were going through it and we were discovering all this, like the first thing we're trying to do is contain it, right? And it got contained very quickly. Wasn't much left to contain, but it got contained quickly. We knew they were out of the network, and then we go to see what kind of damage there was, to see what kind of remediation we can do. We're like, oh shit, there's no backups. Even the cloud backup they had, unfortunately, they were able to get into that, and they took care of that. So we had no choice. We realized very quickly we need to pay this ransom.
Yeah, I think it came down to one software product, actually. It seemed like we could have restored Active Directory servers. We could have restored files from SharePoint, but there was one particular piece of software that had, I don't know, would you say 25, 30 years worth of data in it that we couldn't restore?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that was a showstopper. Like that, every company has a CRM, we use, in the IT industry, there's one that we use, and some people use NetSuite, some people use SAPs. It depends on your industry. Some people use Thomson Reuters.
Right.
In this case, they were hosting it locally, not in that provider's cloud. If they're in that third party's cloud, we also wouldn't have had this severity of the issue.
Correct.
And as you and I are talking about it, anybody that ever sees this, they could be looking at these two guys and be like, well, what the heck? Their job is to prevent this. And the reality is, you can only put as much in place as the client is willing to let you put in place. They have budgets. And we do the best we can to advise and to guide and to give the strategy. But this is one of those situations where they took pieces of our guidance, but not all of it.
Right.
And even with our consistency over years, thankfully, they had gotten cyber insurance. And let me just put this up here. So they did have cyber insurance, right? So we knew quickly, like, okay, you're going to have to pay the ransom. So we sent a message. This was all happening in the middle of the night, and now it's morning. They're awake. They're communicating with us, and we were like, "Listen, this is the situation. You need to get your cyber insurance company on the phone, and we need to have a conversation because you guys are going to have to pay the ransom. We need to get this data back." And as it points out here, insurance is a last resort. In this case, they had to rely on that insurance to cover the ransom payment.
Right.
If they didn't have insurance, frankly, I don't know where they would have gotten the money from. I mean, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and this is not a company that has that kind of money laying around.
And it's not even just a ransom. It's $200,000-$300,000 in ransom. It's remediation time, lawyer time, incident response, forensics, it all adds up very, very quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. And if it's funny because I'm just talking about the one aspect, but you're right. All those other aspects, they all were costs.
Right.
And
For time, they were down
5 days.
5 days, so now you have to recreate all those things that you did in 5 days back into your system. So now you have to have someone, an employee or somebody, keying in entries and doing backup work.
We had to send a few guys on site to rebuild 29 computers.
Right.
They were totally screwed up. And so there's value in listening to this message and feeling like a little scared by it, because that could be helpful. Like if you're listening to this and you're like, oh my God, I really can't afford to have that happen to my company. That is actually the natural thought. And let me just throw this up here for a sec too. The solution is better choices and a belief that it can and will happen. And we're going to leave that up because that's really the mindset. And maybe, Matt, we could talk a little bit about zero trust, and we can talk a little bit about what could be done and what should have been done better. But let me just...
that goes back to a quote I saw a long time ago. They say it's from the FBI, but who knows who said it. There's two kind of companies, those that have been hacked and those that don't know they've been hacked. So it's very,
true.
It's very much like that. Even if you're without good choices and a belief that it can happen, you don't know what's going on with your systems.
It is going to happen. And you and I both, we deal with, small businesses. When I say small, a few employees, maybe $1 million in revenue. Then we've got clients that are, 100 million, up to $100 million in revenue. And we have other ones that are hundreds of millions with hundreds of employees. They all have the same, it's almost like a bad habit. Like, you don't want to believe this is going to happen, because if you do finally come to the realization that it is going to happen, it's guaranteed to happen, it means you need to invest in and put money behind preventative measures, proactively preventative measures, which also there's no guarantee. We hear from people all the time, well, what if I put all this stuff in place? It's not going to guarantee anything. No, it's not.
No,
but it will. Well, it will. It'll guarantee one thing. It'll guarantee to lower your risk exponentially and reduce the magnitude of the damage, right?
Yeah. And as I tell people constantly, my number one goal necessarily is to keep someone out of your system. It's to keep them out of your system long enough they go on to the next one. Or within that, say, 100 days that they're in your system, to find them as quick as possible to get them out before they start poking and prodding around. We had that one a couple years ago at another industry where they stole a bunch of stuff off a file server, and we deemed that they were in the system for 90 some days before they had done that. So, is
that the one that hit over Thanksgiving weekend? Was that the one?
Yes.
Yeah, that was wild.
Yeah, lots of Thanksgiving.
They were almost out of business.
Yeah.
They that's a whole other story. We'll do that on a different episode of this.
Thanksgiving is my busiest time of year.
So we ended up negotiating them from 500,000. I think you were going back and forth. You got them down to 350 because they always negotiate. Right. Then the insurance company gets involved and the lawyers get involved. We have all of our calls, and the insurance company took over. They're really good at this. They've got people trained. And I think they got it down ultimately to 250 or so. So they ended up paying the 250 in ransom. They did. And so we got the decryption keys, and they were back up and running. We had them up and running within a couple of hours after that.
Yeah, once we got the decryption keys, that was almost within an hour. We got the back up.
And then we rebuilt the computers, and then they were back up and running. So frankly, the damage in this case was minimal, because these criminals were honest, and they gave us everything we needed back, and we were back up and running. So the thing is that the mindset that this organization has, they're like 90% of the way there. They have the cyber insurance. They've got certain things in place, but they would not approve MFA. And there were a few other things that needed to be done differently. And unfortunately, now they're, after the fact, that we have a call and they say to me and you, well, can you give us a list of all the best practices and everything you recommend that we don't have in place? And you and I went through and created it, and we're like, wow, every single thing on here, they've already been advised that they should put it in place. Right. I'm sure now they're going to put the rest of the stuff in place.
Mm-hmm. Of course, that's another saying I have a lot of times. You think I'm expensive now? Wait till afterwards. So
it's cheaper. What do I say? It costs more to remediate than it does to reduce the risk and prevent.
Correct.
Right. So if you've got a small business, or even I'll just say this real quick. I was out with a friend of mine last night. and I hope he's not watching this because he knows who he is. He's really one of the smartest people that I've met in a while. Like he's a recent new good friend of mine, and we were just sitting there chatting, and somehow the topic of IT came up. We were just having a cocktail, but he ends up talking about IT in his company, and begins asking me a few questions. So as I start to talk, I begin to ask him questions. Now his company does about 50 million a year. Okay, that's to me, it's a big company.
Yeah.
Okay, he's the only owner, and he's a great business, super well run. He's got trusted advisors that are really giving him good advice. But I start asking him about his cybersecurity. He's got all of his servers are still in his office locally, even his Exchange server. He hasn't moved anything out to the cloud. That's debatable. Some people, that's what they want. But I said, okay, if you're going to keep everything in your office, what cybersecurity measures do you have in place? And I started running down the list. Are you doing pen testing? No. Are you doing vulnerability management? No. Are you doing MFA? It was sort of, the answer was sort of. He did some, but not all, kind of like the person we were just talking about. I said, well, what about on your admin accounts? He's like, no, not any admin accounts. I said, well, how many admins do you have? He's like, well, there's about 10 of us that have admin. And I said, well, do you have a separate account that they use to log in when they're doing admin work? He's like, no, they use their main account. I'm like, that's not good. And I went down the list of everything, and he's not doing anything. Maybe he was doing one or two things, and I just don't recall, but I pretty much think he wasn't doing anything. And I said to him, man, you're going to have a breach. Like, what would happen to you if all your servers got encrypted? Well, I have a backup. Okay, tell me about your backup. And so I began asking questions about that, and there was just a lot of holes. It was not a really well thought out thing. And he has an IT kit. This is like the most important part of the story. He uses a guy he's friendly with. He's an IT guy. And I was this at one point when I was first starting out. He's one guy, he's the main guy, and he's got 3 employees. So I said to my friend, I go, let me guess. He's got one guy that's an engineer, and the other 2 employees are like desktop support people. He's like, yeah, pretty much. Mm-hmm. I go, awesome. Are they giving you advice? He's like, not like what you just gave me. And I said, well, that's important because a small company like that tends to have limited thinking. They tend to not think as big as you are.
Limited time also, they're too busy putting out fires, not enough time to be proactive.
Limited skill set. And they don't have somebody in house. Like, we have you and you're a CISO, but they don't have anybody. So I was like, man, you're a $50 million company, and his goal is to get up to 300 million, and he's killing it. So I'm like, you gotta think about it. But my takeaway was a guy that's that smart, a brilliant guy that's built this business almost from nothing. When he bought the company, it was doing 5 or 6 million a year, and within 6 or 7 years, he got it up to 50, and he's still growing, and he's super smart. But yet, there is this belief. I
might get it up.
Who's targeting us? Why would we be? And I'm like, man, no, it doesn't work that way. You can't think about we're too big, we're too small. They're not coming after it. It doesn't matter. They're coming after everybody. And that's why I'm leaving this up on the bottom of the screen. Your belief has to be it can and will happen.
Yeah.
And I got him thinking. And I think I scared him a little bit because at one point I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't mean to scare you. He's like, yeah, you're not scaring me. He's like, he was speechless. And he's like, you just got me thinking about everything right now. And I'm like, well, good. You should think about it right now. So I hope that somebody watches this and hears the story that I'm telling. And even if one person like rethinks their approach, it's going to happen to you. It's guaranteed to happen to you. But what isn't guaranteed and what you have control over is when it does happen, how you respond, how you react, and how you're prepared. Right, Matt?
Right. And one of the things that we try to remind people is, we have to be right 100% of the time. A threat actor only has to be right once. And once they're right that one time is when they can get in and start picking away.
Yeah. What do you think? So looking at the people that we just finished, we cleaned up their breach. Thankfully, their backup damage ended up being nothing. Their insurance premium is probably going to go up. But beyond that, they got lucky. They've learned their lesson. They're doing more of the things we've told them to do now. They're putting more things in place. We changed their entire backup model. The costs have gone up a little bit, but now they realize that they need to invest in their cybersecurity. The other gentleman I just told you about, whole other, like he needs to do something. Yeah. What are maybe give me the top 5, 6, 7 things that would be in alignment with typical insurance policies that require require certain things?
You're always going to have MFA, anything that you can, especially email, system access, anything important. You're going to want to conduct regular vulnerability and software assessments. You're going to want to know what's on your systems and what's vulnerable to be, attacked by a threat actor. Network security monitoring of your email to make sure. I'll give you on the email. We recently did a thing with 9,000 realtors on the West Coast. We monitored all their email. Probably 10 to 15 times a week, we stopped some sort of wire fraud happening from overseas just by keeping an eye on their email and login locations. And we could not get them to use MFA. So continue vulnerability monitoring, penetration testing, just knowing what's in your network, some sort of inventory and application. For instance, the one particular machine and another one, nobody knew was on a network for a device our system we were doing, and that happened to be the machine that was, the bad one because it was just sitting out there by itself. Knowledge is power when it comes to your network and preventing any sort of cyber incursion.
So MFA, pen testing,
vulnerability assessments,
and I think even what we do is it's real time. We install a package that's running real time.
Yep. Thorough account management, making sure that you have separate.
Say that one again.
Thorough. I call it thorough account management.
Thorough account management.
Yeah, making sure you're not everyone's an admin.
So yeah, controls are important.
Right.
Network security monitoring is a big one.
Very important. Yeah.
Tell us what is that doing?
So what that's doing is that's looking at all the traffic on your network, all the traffic from your workstations, anything that we can get any sort of log from. We monitor it. We have certain things that we look for, certain things that the public tells us to look for, certain things the FBI tells us to look for. We correlate it all up, and then we spit out and send alerts into, for instance, like your team will send alerts, and we'll work them together to make sure nothing's been breached from FI. What do we call it? Everything is a breach till we determine it's not a breach. So
100%.
Yeah.
Well, when you hear me sometimes give these analogies, right? When I'm talking to our team, and I sometimes I'll talk about I spent like 15 years on the fire department up in northern New Jersey, and if you get a call for a fire alarm, you can't assume it's a false alarm.
Right.
You got it, lights and sirens. You're blowing through intersections. It's a lot of fun, actually.
Yeah, everything's a fire, not a fire, right?
Yeah, until you've walked the entire house or whatever it is, and you've confirmed that there's nothing going on, you act as if there is. And I have to remind our team sometimes, that we get so many of these alerts and we get so many false alarms that you could easily be like, oh, it's nothing. And sometimes we got to remind everybody, you never know. Don't ever take your foot off the gas. Don't ever stop until you've proven it's not. And now we have something in place, which is like we need multiple signatures of approval,
correct? Yep.
Verifying that we all agree it's not.
Yeah, I mean, I even have to tell my own team sometimes. They'll come to me and say, "Hey, we think this is a thing, but we don't really think it is." And I was like, "Well, can you prove it's not?" And
that's the question. Show it to me. Show me the data. Show me the proof.
Right.
We have network security monitoring, which is key because if somebody gets in through a phishing email, which by the way, another thing that you might have mentioned if would have been no before. So we want to put a phishing security and awareness training tool in place to sensitize people to be able to identify and look for the fake emails, because I think the metric right now is like 94 or 95% of cyber breaches originate with phishing emails. You want to hear a crazy metric? I think you and I talked about this once. Most people will invest 95% of their IT cybersecurity budget in things like firewall security and all these different things, and spend just a little bit or nothing on preventing phishing emails from being clicked. However, 95% of the breaches come from phishing emails, so they have it backwards.
Yeah, that's a common thing we see all the time. People spend a lot of money on firewalls, and antivirus, and what they call next generation AV, all those things.
And then they think that they're doing all the right things. And when I read that statistic somewhere recently, it was like a Verizon report. It was like a legit, solid study that was done.
Right. And the one thing the last thing I would mention that they need, that this particular client had, that I think helped because it let us contact people faster, was a thorough and detailed incident response plan. So once the encryption happened, we were able to pull that up and know phone trees and who their internet is, and everything was already on there. So we didn't have to go searching for lots of information.
Yeah,
Very
that's good. That's huge.
having something that you can pull up. And I will say, this one's happened to me online, but the client should also have it printed out somewhere offline, because if all your stuff's encrypted, you can't get your incident response plan.
Which was the case of the people we were just working with.
Right. Yeah.
And luckily they were small, and we all just knew what the plan was because it was a small organization.
Right.
So we left off with network security monitoring. We talked about phishing security and awareness training.
And
I feel like there's one really important thing that we left off. Did we? Oh, email security monitoring. So you can detect email attempts to log into email accounts from outside the U.S.
I kind of looked at together with network, but yeah, email security monitoring is very important, especially anything out of what we call out of bounds. If you have we have a place here in Maryland that they want us to know anytime anyone outside of Maryland logs into their email, and it's a lot of noise, but it's been prevented quite a few breaches already.
So there's somebody just typed me a question. It says, why would a company not initially want to approve MFA? And the answer to that question in the case we're talking about was because setting up the MFA for them, because of the way they're set up, would have been a disruption to their business for too many hours. And they wanted it to be set up in custom ways with different groups because of the type of business they have. And they're using POS, point of sale machines. It wasn't like a very straightforward, typical cookie cutter deployment. And so they just kept moving it forward. And finally he just said, forget it. We'll revisit it next year. And I kept sending him emails that were like not just encouraging him, but like without beating him over the head. Like, this is a bad idea.
Yeah. I mean, there's only what you can do and poke and prod. And ultimately the customer bears the final responsibility for, selecting services they want.
Now we have another client right now who you and I service together. Obviously can't say the name. We just gave them a proposal. Can't talk today. We gave them a proposal to put MFA specifically on admin accounts. They only have a couple. It was like $20 a month, $24 a month. No joke. They declined it. Okay. And I was shocked. This is a multi-million-dollar company that has offices globally.
Mm-hmm.
And they like, what? $24 a month? So this is what I decided to do. I can't even I can't even get into a conversation with them about why they declined it. I'm just going to put it in place, and I'm going to add $24 a month to their bill. I mean, it's at a certain point, like, I have to protect somebody from themselves.
Yep.
Like, you're kidding me? $24, right? They make millions of dollars. Can't even begin to understand the logic. So the person in the chat that asked the question, why would a company not initially want to approve MFA? Well, in one case, the person didn't want to spend $24 a month. In another case, it was just inconvenient. But there's really no good reason. There is no actual good reason why somebody would not want to approve a multi-factor authentication project. I mean, it's almost like business suicide. Yeah,
a lot of it's inconvenience. I know there's a customer that I've been trying to get MFA turned on for years, and they have nurses who use nursing stations, don't necessarily have their own computers, and they don't want them to have to put MFA on their personal cell phones. And we're like, okay, well, there's lots of options around that, but then they don't want to spend money for the options around not having the nurses have their own personal cell phones. So, yeah.
Listen, there are, for sure, but you just gave a great example. There are much larger deployments that are disruptive and that are not so straightforward. But that's not a reason not to do it. You just got to work through it. You got to stage it. You got to work it out. These things are just basic things now. So look,
everybody uses some form of MFA now. I mean, you log into your bank, they send you a SMS code. You log into 401ks, your electric bill, whatever. Everybody is using at some form or another some sort of MFA or second factor authentication somewhere.
I mean, if you do it for your bank accounts, I have it on all my financial accounts. I have it on everything. And I wouldn't even think of turning it off. Could you imagine if somebody got access to your money? Why would you want somebody to have access to your business?
Right.
And put you out of business? So to the person who asked that question, that's a great question. And there is actually no good answer. Okay. It's not, it goes back to what I've left on the screen. The solution is better choices and a belief that it can and will happen to you. And that is a mindset to have. And there's another term for it, which is much more severe, which is zero trust. And there's a zero trust mindset and it's an entire
that's
methodology.
your next topic. That's an entire 45
Yeah.
hour, 2 hour discussion.
Yeah. So Matt, I think this was great. I think we'll do this every week. Hopefully we'll get an audience, get some people that come in here and begin to ask questions, ask us good questions. Doesn't cost anybody anything. We're here for you every week. We'll do this if you do decide that you have questions and you want us to help you, of course we're here to help you, and we can give you guidance. Even if you have an IT company or a cyber company and you just want to double check them or you want to audit them, we can do that for you. We do that for people frequently, kind of behind the scenes, because they're not sure if they're getting what they want. We've done that for people, and where they think that they're bulletproof, and all of a sudden they come to find out, like, what? We don't have this, we don't have that, we don't. And you'd be surprised what you think is in place and isn't until you ask some questions. So, we're just here as a resource. That's our intention.
Yep, that sounds perfect.
All right. Well, I had a good time, Mr. Matt.
Thank you. Me too.
We're gonna call it quits. We're gonna end the live stream, and we will do this again next Monday at 3:30.
That sounds great.
I'll talk to you later, man.
All right, man. See ya. Have a good one.